Welcome to another video from Gweilo 60. The United States has been trying to export their form of democracy around the world, and mainly lately to China since the Nixon days, or even earlier, since the Second World War. And you got to wonder why they're doing this. Is it because it's easier to compete with an incompetent government than with a competent government? I'm going to get into some numbers and you'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit here. But if China had taken on the same type of governance as the United States, what kind of trouble would they be in this day and age with things like crime and COVID and economy and all of these different things? And you got to understand that China is about 4 times the population of the United States. The United States right now has 2.3 million people in prison. Okay, so if China dealt with things exactly the same way as the United States does, according to the population per capita, they would have 9.2 million people in prison at this time, where China actually has 1.7 million people in prison. So you can see the difference in how much cost that would be to house all of those inmates. 9.2 million if it was done the same as the United States. Whoa, that's a lot of people. That'd be just about a third of the population of all of Canada. And they say China is a violent society. Over 16,400 and some murders in the United States in a year. You come over to China and it's about 13,000. Pretty similar. If you take the population into account per capita, they'd have over 69,000 murders in China in a year, not 13,000. So, what is the safer community to live in? And I've been saying this over and over and over, guys. China is probably one of the safest places that you can be in the entire world. There's just no violent crime here. It's one of those things that but reading the statistics, when they say 13,000 murders in a year, I guess there is violent crime in China. It's just, I've never seen it. Okay, now think about the COVID thing. The United States had over 26 million cases, 400 and some thousand dead. They're logging 150 or more thousand cases. I think on January 31st it was just over 164,000. I think it's been up to 187,000 or over that. So that's per day type thing. So you've got to understand that if China was dealing with COVID the same way, they would have over 104 million people that have gotten sick with COVID, and 1.7 million dead, instead of, I think there's about 8,500 dead, and the numbers are negligible, even less than what Canada has. It's one of those things. So, and you wonder why China isn't taking the United States seriously when they try to export their type of governance to a place like China. Incompetence at its best. You've got two sides fighting over everything. You've got the whole country divided. Nobody can make any decisions, and it shows in the first 2 things that I've talked about: prisons and COVID. Now let's talk the elephant in the room, the military. Yes. See, the United States, I think, has 1.7 million servicemen in service, and they spend, I think, $738 billion on their military. It's 3.52% of their annual GDP goes into military. In China, they've got 2 million, so they've got a bigger army in China than they do in the United States. But they only spend $177 billion, 1.3% of their GDP, if I'm not mistaken. So a big difference. It's they're not spending as much. They're getting more bang for their buck. They've got more soldiers on the ground. But the difference is, the Chinese soldiers are local, on the ground here in China. With the United States, they've got 800, more than 800 bases around the world. It costs more money to keep soldiers abroad in places like Germany and Japan and South Korea, whatever type thing. Over 800 bases. So they're spending a lot of money on their military that could go into infrastructure and things like that. Because of the population of China, if they dealt with their military the same as the United States does, they would have 5.2 million. 5.2 million soldiers if it was the same per capita. I just keep looking at this stuff and thinking, holy smokes, is the United States a military run country, or they're supposed to be the land of the free, democracy? Why would they need 800 bases around the world? Why would they need to export their form of democracy? Because it's easier to compete with an incompetent government than a competent government. And China has a competent government. Not to mention that if China had the same number of bases around the world as compared to the United States, based on the size of their population, it would be 3,200 bases. That would just be ridiculous. You'd have to have, like, I don't know, how many countries are there? 188 countries? So you'd have to have a whack of bases in every country around the world. Now think about debt. You see, the United States is in debt up to their noses, guys. You know, they've got over $25,000 per person in debt. They're carrying 31% of the whole of the world's debt in the United States. In China, per person, $1,356. The United States, 42% of their GDP is debt. $27 trillion, guys. The United States, and they've only got 1/4 of the population of China. China's got 5.5 trillion in debt, about 15% of their GDP. So you see the big difference here. One is paying through the nose interest rates on that debt, and you know, the thing is that China carries, I think, $1.07 trillion worth of American debt. They hold that debt. They don't seem to understand that debt has to be paid back at some point in time. Other countries around the world aren't going to keep giving money to a place like the United States and not expect to be paid back. Let's talk something a little bit closer to home. Obesity rates. Obesity rates in the United States are over 42% of the population. Wow. In China, it's like between 5 and 6% of the population. People are obviously not taking care of themselves. Have they lost the will to be healthy? I think a gauge of the happiness of a population is how they take care of themselves. Do they have time to take care of themselves? Do they eat the right food? Do they exercise? Are they happy at work? The quality of life, the standard of living may be higher in the United States, but is the quality of life as good as what it is here in China? I actually don't think so. How can you feel good about yourself if just about half of your population is overweight? I notice it when I go back to Canada. Canada's no different than the United States when it comes to this. I go to the Vancouver airport and I look around and I think, holy smokes, everybody grew. You know, when I come to China, I've been here for so long that I basically see, and I look and everybody's fairly in shape. You see the odd chubby person walking around, but you don't see it very often. It's getting more prevalent now than it has been in the past, probably because of McDonald's and Subway and KFC and whatever. Or maybe they just have more expendable cash now. But, you know, the Chinese people are getting fatter, you know, and is that a politically correct way of saying that? Yes, in my world it is. But the idea that the obesity rate is like 8 times that of China tells you something about how China is actually operated. In the United States, you've got 148 million people that are obese. If that was China with a population, it'd be over 600 million. Could you just imagine the healthcare costs that would be associated with that many obese people in one country? 600 million? No wonder China doesn't operate their country the same way as the United States. It would overwhelm the healthcare system. It would cost too much in military. The prisons, you'd have to build prisons out Yang here in China to house 9.2 million people. Like, it's ridiculous. And COVID, well, just think, if you had 1.6 to 1.7 dead people because of COVID, how happy would the people of this country be? How happy should the people of the United States be to see what's happening in their country? Even looking at HIV/AIDS, 1.25 million people in the United States have been diagnosed with either HIV or AIDS. It's 1.2 million in China, so basically the same. But it's not the same because you're looking at a population that's 4 times the size. So you'd have 5 million people. And with that many people, how do you know that they know and then they pass it on? And it's not unlike COVID. It can be transmitted, not as easily, but it can be transmitted. So yeah, you got $11,000 per person spent in the United States, American dollars, per year for healthcare. $11,000, guys. That's $14.4 trillion. Ouch! You know what I mean? In China, they spend about 4,700 RMB, which translates into about, I don't know, between 750 and 800 bucks American. Okay? So just think, 800 bucks at the outside, 11,000 per person in the States. So China's spending about $1 trillion on healthcare. And the States, with 1/4 of the population, is spending $4.4 trillion. No wonder it costs more to live in the States. No wonder they have to tax the living bejesus out of their people. And no wonder the people are unhappy with their government. Well, at least half of them are. At any one time, depending on who gets in, the Democrats or the Republicans. Hey, you know what I mean? You watch the news, so do I. And I picked this spot because it's nice and quiet. And you look in the back and it looks like some European little settlement back there. This is actually an innovation park that has been built, and it's full of new innovative businesses that, technology and innovation and all of those other things that make China economically stronger. And if you don't believe me, check the other side out. Oh yeah, it's China, guys and girls. This is basically just off the beaten path in Nanning City, but it's quiet. It's by a little creek. Guy over there fishing, back over yonder there. But it's quiet. So I figured because of the topic that I'm talking about, I don't have to be running around through a whole bunch of people. And because we're coming up on Lunar New Year in I think 8 or 9 days, there's not a lot of people in the city as there usually is. The universities are shut down, the schools are shut down. People are starting to get up and leave the city back to the country, going home. I sure hope it doesn't have a flare-up of COVID because of the Lunar New Year, but everybody last year didn't get to go home on the holidays, so this year is sort of a special one, and there's been a lot of testing for COVID, there's been a lot of mask wearing, there's been, people have been really careful because they know that if they're not, they'll have flare-ups around the country and everything will get locked down, and they want to go home and they want to see their family and their friends.
南面是首家免锅底串串，锅底我们是不收费的，共有76种菜品，糖水、炸鸭饺，每天限量送出100份，还等什么？抓紧进店品尝吧！